There is a point to me telling you this story, which I'll get to at the end, but I hope you enjoy it on the way. But it is just a story. And I guess, ultimately, it's a story about... Oh, I need a clicker. I'm not very good at IT, but you will notice that. No, I don't want that. That's the end. Right, ignore. Close your eyes. Just close your eyes. Just leave it. It's all right. I've got it.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the beginning. Okay. So I guess this comes from, fundamentally, my concern that we have a major systems breakdown and that nobody's really talking about it. I guess this comes from the point of view that we've got a hell of a lot of politicians who are bookkeepers and we're completely and utterly obsessed by money, but we're totally blind to the issues of tomorrow around people actually fighting over water, around a scale of mass migration like we've never seen before. And ultimately, that each and every one of us, instead of kind of trying to find some way different out of this, is sleepwalking very positively into a nightmare. And from my point of view, irrespective of the details of the temperature and the sea level and whatever else it might be, from my point of view, we are handing over a quite appalling possibility for our children's tomorrows. So, fundamentally, about 8 years ago, I thought, okay, well, this is all totally depressing, and I can drink cocktails with the best of them. But there comes a point when maybe you just put the cocktail glass down and you start to think, is it possible that we could start to think about helping each and every one of us be part of a solution, not a problem? And 8 years ago, we took a town like this, which is my town. It's about 35 minutes from here. It's called Todmorden. It's very grey, it can be a little bit bleak, it's got sheep that fall over in a high wind and stuff like that. But it's got all the sorts of issues that a typical northern market town has got around employment, around health, about, concern about the kids of tomorrow and whatever it might be. And we took it from a town like that and we turned it into a town that looks like this, which has got fruit and veg and herbs growing all over the place. Now, the reason we did that was not because we were bored, but the time was ripe for a bit of a grassroots revolution. And in the absence of anybody else at a national level or regional or global coming up with any solutions about the whole issues around climate change and the things that I give a damn about, we were going to see if we could find a way ourselves to find a hook that could engage people at every level, irrespective of age and income and culture and ability, to say, I get that and I am going to do something different tomorrow than what I did yesterday. Now, it's an experiment that we started 8 years ago, and we hadn't the foggiest idea whether it was possible for a bunch of people with no money, no reports, no policy documents, no bureaucracy, no nothing like that, just a bunch of people who lived in the north of England to come together and find a really simple model that people could say, oh, I get that. Yeah, I'll have a bash at doing that. So, fundamentally, this is the model. Now, it's a really simple model that puts local food, because food is the unifying language. If you want to get people off their backsides and starting to think creatively about their power in telling a different story for tomorrow, food is the one that does it. I could have done peak oil, but I wouldn't have got a lot of traction on the ground. So we're actually talking about if you put local food at the heart of the community, that's to say create edible landscapes everywhere. Wherever you walk, along the street, at the doctor's, at the railway station, you name it, you put food and see if it starts a conversation. And then having put food in edible landscapes all over the place, you start to think about how you can help other people create edible landscapes in a time when people have forgotten how to grow food or how to graft a tree or skin a rabbit or whatever else it might be. So you put local food at the heart of learning in the place that you call home. Borough, neighbourhood, town, village, I don't care where it is. It's where you care about. And then the last bit of the model is local food in edible landscapes, local food at the heart of what we're learning and passing on, local food at the heart of how we spend our money. Because far too often we are boring as a race because we basically think that we are victims and everybody else. No, we're not. We have the power to change the future. We have the power to change the economy. We have the power to change the spaces of our lives and we will to do it. And what we need to do is to start to think how we connect edible landscapes with what we spend our money on, with what we're learning in tomorrow, and bringing those together, seeing whether we can actually change the future. Now, this is a really simple model, and I always share this with people because it was created in 2.5 hours between London and Manchester on a Virgin serviette, which is fairly small, and I only had one biro, and therefore it's a very simple model. But the interesting thing about this, it's all about the simplicity of the story. And as I get to the end of the presentation, I have a big ask for you guys, because it is blindingly obvious from the fact that I forgot about this clicker and everything else that I am no good at the stuff that you guys are good at. I can tell a story and I have one story to tell, but I need you people out there to help me make it much bigger and get to a much larger audience. But let me show you some holiday shots as we go along the way about what we've been doing for the past 8 years, which may sound very, limited. What can you do with local food? Well, I tell you, you can change a hell of a lot. So let's imagine, in the first instance, we want to create edible landscapes everywhere. Would it make a difference to how we see space? Would it make a difference to how we think about our relationships? Would it make a difference to our conversations? Well, one of the first edible landscapes that we did was this grass verge. This is Todmorden. It's a typical grey day. It's a grass verge along the side of the road, and it used to look like that top right-hand corner, which is to say it's a dog toilet. It was ignored by the local authority, and therefore, because it was a dog toilet, people threw fag packets down and beer cans and all the rest of it, and they didn't take any care whatsoever of that particular space in their particular town. So, without asking anybody's permission, obviously, you put on your plastic gloves, you go out there and you clean it all up, and you plant vegetables and you plant cherry trees and you plant herbs and whatever else it is. The point about this is public realm. Why would you ask anybody's permission to turn a dog toilet in a public realm into a herb garden for general use? You wouldn't bother, would you? So don't bother going to ask the powers that be about things that you want to do that's your gift to your community. Just go out and make them better. The interesting thing about taking over a dog toilet and turning it into a herb garden is that the local authority eventually puts a bench in there and starts to mow it. We never asked them to do that, but it started to change people's approach to the spaces of their lives. And this is what happens all the time. Just get on with changing the world. What we've got here is a health centre. Now, here we've got honest to God, they've put 8 million quid's worth into a health centre and they surround it with inedible prickly plants, and then they run a multi-million-pound Eat 5 a Day campaign so that we can start to think about healthy eating. What's the point of that? So what we did is had a word with our doctors, because we thought they'd noticed that we're taking up all the, landscaping around the health centre, and we took all up the inedible stuff and we planted apples and pears and raspberries and strawberries and an apothecary garden at the back and whatever else it might be. Now, 8 years on, what's happening is people in health are now starting to talk to us about, well, isn't it a good idea that we create these edible landscapes all over the place, because it doesn't cost you any more money to do it. And suddenly you start rebranding health into something that is very positive, something that's not about popping pills and cutting people open, but is about taking families, and it's got nothing to do with being stigmatised, through to a health centre where you can taste the fruit. You can taste the herbs. You can pick them. They're all food for free. They're all food for sharing. It's a different approach to using your public space, but it makes a lot more sense for the public money that's invested in that building. And then we've got a good old job centre. We were asked, would we mind to do something at a job centre? Well, I ask you, you can't say no, can you? You've lost your job. You have to walk every week past that tarmac. It's soul destroying. So we created an edible garden that's looked after by some neighbours. We did it in the middle of winter. It didn't cost these people one single penny. It was a snowstorm. We created an edible garden for them. Very, simple. You can see apple trees, there's some courgettes in there, there's a few spuds in there or whatever. The one thing we asked, would you mind plugging in this bit of electricity into your system so we can make the raised beds? And they said, no, sorry, it's not pad tested, you can't. So, obviously, a bit of one-hand clapping going on there, but nevertheless, we are starting to, in the spaces of our lives, create these sorts of landscapes. And one of the last ones I just want to show you, and we've got them at the railway station, and we've got them at the college, and we've got them at the old people's home, we've got them all over the place, because there's no point in having a propaganda garden that starts a conversation about a different future down the end of a street where nobody can see it. So here we have the good old police. It's on a main road in Burnley, in Todmorden, on the Burnley Road. We want some wood, because all this is about what can you do with what you've got. You do not have to have a cheque to start this revolution. You just open your bottom drawers and work out what it is and get it there and get it planted. So we created these raised beds. We planted sweet corn. Not that it's native to Todmorden, but it's taller than the police and it made us laugh. And the interesting thing about this is the police now come from all over the north of England to have a look at what this strange little community is doing in creating edible landscapes all over the place, because They themselves say, first of all, environmental damage is down. We didn't intend that to happen, but it happens because people do not vandalise food. And secondly, the relationships between the police and the general public has never been better. People just crack up when they see the police watering the sweet corn or doing whatever they do. Why doesn't that take the sting out of any possible tension? Well, of course it does. So, very simply, by creating edible landscapes, food to share, by having a common language that, as I say, cuts across age, income, culture and ability, you can start to change people's perceptions of their space, their relationships to their space, the thoughts about the conversations with their neighbours, the food sharing that might go on, whatever. But that's all very well and good because there's a bunch of people that are doing that are really keen on a bit of an edible revolution. But how do we help everybody else get into that mindset? Well, you teach them how to do it. Now, of course, there's loads of stuff already going on. None of this is rocket science. It's just about joining the dots. So you work with the kids that actually want to do it. And there are a few teachers out there that actually want to do that, but teach people to be urban gardeners of the future, which is not a terribly bad idea because if you believe Jonathan Porritt and what he says, that by 2050, 40% of our own food needs to be in our urban settings, vertically, on rooftops or whatever, and we haven't got a government that's investing anything like any money on people learning those skills, then maybe somebody somewhere ought to just tap them on the shoulder and say they ought to start to rethink how they're investing the education budget. But anyway, that's just a thought. We're teaching some kids in schools, but then there's no point in them learning these great things and then going home to a pot noodle that's been flown halfway across the planet, is there? So we also teach them outside of school. We teach people like Sid to poke people's eye out with a fork. We teach other little kids like Salmon, I can't remember, to just recognise plants, understand living soils, feel it under their fingernails, start to understand there's a difference between dirt and soil. Just drip, 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 start to reconnect to environment, reconnect to seasonality, reconnect to biodiversity in a really informal way through food. And then, of course, we rack up on the street with a tent that's dead fast to put up and dead fast to get down because we've no intention of asking anybody's permission to do it. So we just go there and we show people how to cook that stuff seasonally. So we've got edible landscapes. We're teaching people new skills about growing stuff. We're teaching people some skills about cooking. And there's loads of people already know this from a diverse cross-section of the community, but nobody ever asks them for their opinion. This is a way in through a door that allows more people to think positively about their role in their community. And this is another thing we do. That's Geronimo. We do aquaponics. We teach aquaponics. We teach hydroponics. There's a huge amount of skills in our community about hydroponics. It's just on the whole illegal. But at some point, we will get them back on our side and help to create the sorts of food systems that we want. And this is growing pak choy and all manner of other things at an aqua garden that we've got. So that's your edible landscapes and that's your learning. What about creating a lively local economy? Well, we haven't got any people that are paid to do any of this. We're all a bunch of volunteers. So how do we create that local sticky money? Well, we've got a market hall that was dying on its feet. So, Market Town Market Hall, let's start with that. We go in there and we raise 15 quid and we give them all a blackboard. You can't get much more low-tech than this. You give them a blackboard, you scribble on what's local, and then that starts the conversation. People start to go to those stalls, and year after year after year, that business starts to build up. As a result of that, we've now got local food in every single cafe, market stall, restaurant, you name it, they're all there, whether it's beer or cheese or bread or whatever it might be. Because if you stimulate a demand around thinking about local food, more people are going to seek it out. And if people are going to seek it out, then the farmers and the other processors and producers will start to supply it. It's not rocket science. The market will follow the demand. So suddenly, a bunch of people that are just interested in local food to help people start to rethink their own future have started to create a local economy in a way that we'd never really envisaged in the past. And we've created a couple of social enterprises ourselves, the incredible aqua garden that teaches aquaponics, hydroponics and geoponics, and the local farm that produces a lot more outdoor food for local restaurants. But the biggest thing we've actually done for the economy is to create a new form of tourism called vegetable tourism. And people actually do come from all over the world to have a poke around, quite often in February, in the middle of winter when there's nothing there in the first place, to some of our raised beds and some of the stuff that we're actually growing, and they are not doing it because we're growing vegetables. They're doing it because we're growing people. That's all we're trying to do. We're just trying to reinvent ourselves in a way that is more sustainable and more in tune with our kids' future. But these wonderful people from all over the globe want to have a route to walk on. They come from, we're dead blasé in Tomlin, you know. I mean, we have camera crews walking all over the place from Korea and China and India. And what we like to say in Todmorden, and you may understand this, is that although yesterday everybody used to go to Hebden Bridge, that is so yesterday. Everybody's coming to Todmorden now. So anyway, we created this green route, which is a walking route, because again, what could we do? You're just using your imagination. How can we communicate? So they walk past all our propaganda beds, but they also walk past our market, they walk past our small shops, they walk past our cafes. They start to redefine their footfall and therefore invest in a local economy. And we've got these plots all over the middle of town. This is a particular one. It's called Propaganda. It's called Pollination Street, rather. It's not a real street, and it's not actually called Pollination Street. We just took over a space in the middle of the town that was brownfield, and we've turned it into that. And we're growing rhubarb and all sorts of stuff all over it. The really interesting thing about that is, first of all, when we did that, the local authority put picnic benches in there so people could actually enjoy the experience. We never asked them to do that. And now we have a bunch of people in town that are really interested in fighting local plans that want to build over that space in the middle of their town, which is their space, their green space, where they have their harvest, where they have their annual events. Now, trust me, 8 years ago in Todmorden, nobody could have given a stuff about what their town looked like. But suddenly now people are thinking about where they want what built, whether they want green spaces around the place. If they're going to build houses, can they make sure there's places for them to grow on? If they're going to put polytunnels, where they're actually going to do that. If they're going to have supermarkets, whether they want it or they don't. Suddenly you've got people with an opinion when they never had one before, and all you've done is grown vegetables. And the interesting thing about that model, which is community meets learning meets business around local food, is it's so simple. You don't have to have a university degree to get it. You just start off, roll your sleeves up and get on. As you've just said, you just fucking do it. So now we've got sprouts all over the place, and these sprouts are all over the UK. But we've also got 700 communities all over the world. Are they all doing the 3 plates all at the same time? No, they're not, but they're doing propaganda. They're taking over public realm. They're taking over health authorities. They're demanding that their government starts to rethink a model of actually making local food cheaper than food flown halfway across the planet. All the things that suddenly thinking about you having an opinion that's worthwhile happens when you grow local food. Now then, we've also, I'm nearly there, guys. We also created a network that helps students speak to student and community worker to community worker and tenant to tenant and whatever else it is. Because what we're trying to say is every single community has the potential to redefine its more sustainable future if people give it half a chance. And I've got to say, they are way ahead of the politicians and the power that be, who are frightened to death of all this stuff happening. But sooner or later, they've got to grow up. They've got to understand that the people have got a right to redefine their own future. So that was the last 8 years. It's taken a good while for us to kind of like get the model and just say, no, it's really simple. You don't have... Because people are so sophisticated. What happens is you get really clever people, particularly those that sort of advise politicians, and they go, oh, it's all far too complicated. Climate change and changing, it's all... And we say, no, it's not actually. It's one step at a time. It's what you can actually do with your own life, and you can actually make a difference. But we've now decided what the next 8 years are going to be. So I've had enough of this Northern Powerhouse malarkey. And what we've decided is we're going to start to see whether we can stretch that model of community meets learning meets business around local food. Is it possible for us to do that and have an impact on jobs? Is it possible for us to do that and have an impact on supply chains, to have an impact on how we think about health, to have an impact on how we think about community development, to have an impact on the way our places look and the way people relate to each other in those communities? Could we possibly use that model to redefine prosperity? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take that, and the only reason there's a star on Harrogate is just I happened to rip that map off yesterday because I was really late in putting this presentation, so forgive me. It's not like Harrogate's key to this, because it isn't. But what we're actually going to do is take that territory of the Northern Powerhouse and say, do you know, already we're working with professors, we're working with communicators, we're working with all sorts of really fantastic people that I've rung up and said, are you up for a bit of this? And they've gone, go on, let's have a crack at it. So what we're going to do is link all those incredible edible communities, and we've got dozens all over the place, with all those incredible universities that are growing on campus, that are thinking about their procurement policies, with all those hospitals we've been in contact with that are redefining the spaces and making them edible, with all those prisons that are using food to allow people a different pathway back into the community. All these different institutions using food to drive change. We are going to find a mechanism to bring those together together into the Incredible Edible movement and show that you can, over time, redefine what you mean by prosperity, that we do not have to take it's a growth and jobs agenda, because that is not the way that we create a kinder future for our children. So here's the thing. We can't do it without you guys. What I need when I've got people in New Zealand talking to me about how I want to do this, I want them to be able to see how I'm doing it. I don't want them to have to fly halfway across the planet to see what we're actually doing. It doesn't make any sense. I want them to experience what we're doing. I want to make the connections and the conversations, as the gentleman was saying earlier, across that patch so that people can actually see that collectively they can define their futures. And ultimately, this is the lesson I've learned from the past 8 years. You have to believe in the power of small actions because you really can change your history. Thank you.
So first off, thanks again. It's always great to hear the story. And it's always great to hear that it develops every time. And this is perhaps the biggest leap you're now trying to make, if you will. So just to clarify the ask of you, so ultimately, I guess it's what it sounds like is that you're trying to figure out how do you extend the model, the power of what you've done in a way that, as you mentioned, doesn't require people to fly here to see how they do it, what it feels like, and all that sort of stuff. And just, I mean, while it's, I mean, I guess you used to say, I guess, when you started this, that if you ate, then you were in, right?
Yeah.
That was the but was it always created with the idea of it being a model for, effectively, it sounds like what you're really doing is rebuilding community in a fairly subversive way. So instead of saying, oh, we want to rebuild our communities, you kind of say, we're going to be planting these gardens, and oh, by the way, a community happens to arise.
I mean, absolutely. You know, in my time, I've been government advisor and leader of health authority and chaired all sorts of hospital trusts. And I've done all that top-down stuff, and it doesn't work. We wouldn't be in the mess we're in if that worked. So therefore, here's a proposition that says, let's try it from another way. And then as we actually muster our troops and start to learn some lessons about give us back our spaces to grow on, give us back our hospitals and healthcare, give us whatever it might be, then you start to challenge the framework of the policymakers and say, give us a kind of framework and we can do that. But what matters with Incredible Edible is the story. It's the story, the story's story. And we need to get the story out. We need to help people understand that, you know, they have a part in this story. This isn't us doing it to them. This is our collective story. And so ultimately, this is a pretty big mountain to climb. But then 8 years on, I wouldn't have thought I got in a movement that, you know, has so many tentacles that it's got at the moment. So if we're going to take on the Northern Powerhouse in a really positive and friendly way, then what we need to do is to be able to catch those great examples of people being totally magnificent in the way they live their lives. And, you know, I think you said it earlier, I am not of the generation that was brought up with the internet. So I haven't the foggiest idea what I need to do, but I'm blooming sure that somebody out there does. So I'm just asking you, come and tap me on the shoulder and say, I want a bit of that. I've no idea where we're going, but let's give it a crack. And that's what I'd like.
Cool. So just one last thing. We've got, I believe we've got 10 copies of your book.
Oh, yeah.
That's right. Great. So we've got 10 copies of Pam's book, Incredible, which she'll be signing down in the cafe. I must be down in the cafe. Down by near the registration area.
Cool.
It is free of charge. So come quickly if you want to get in line. And of course, book or not, if you want to have a chat with Pam, she'll obviously be there as well.
I'll be delighted
to have a further conversation with.
Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you.